As Kiev rolled out a new, US-backed 20-point roadmap to end the war, Moscow doubled down on its demand that any negotiations take place strictly behind closed doors, away from public and media scrutiny. The Kremlin publicly declined to offer details, even as multiple reports suggested Russia is pushing to amend the draft deal on core issues like NATO limits, Western sanctions, and the status of occupied territory. Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov pointedly refused to discuss Moscow's alleged demands linked to the plan, signaling that Russia wants to keep its bargaining position opaque at this stage. In an interview with Russian business daily RBK on December 24, Peskov again declined to weigh in on any reported developments, repeating that the negotiation process is too sensitive for open commentary. Russian presidential spokesperson, Dmitry Peskov, said, "Any Ukraine peace talks should be held behind closed doors rather than through megaphone diplomacy. No, there will be no comments here. We continue to believe that everything should be conducted behind closed doors." Earlier, Peskov confirmed that President Vladimir Putin had been fully briefed on the latest US proposals for a Ukraine peace plan, but stressed that Russia would only spell out its stance after internal consultations.
Kirill Dmitriev has already had the opportunity to brief the president on the outcome of his trip in detail. Based on the information the head of state received, we now intend to formulate our further position and resume contacts in the near future through the channels that are currently operating.
On December 24, President Volodymyr Zelensky publicly unveiled a detailed 20-point proposal that, among other steps, demands a phased Russian troop withdrawal from several occupied regions to make any deal viable. Zelensky specifically called for Russian forces to pull out from the Kharkiv, Dnipropetrovsk, Sumy, and Mykolaiv regions, framing this withdrawal as a core condition for the new agreement to take effect. All signatories affirm that Ukraine is a sovereign, independent state. Russia and Ukraine enter a full non-aggression agreement, monitored via satellite and drone surveillance along the contact line. Ukraine receives formal security guarantees from the US, NATO states, and European partners. The size of Ukraine's armed forces will be fixed at 800,000 personnel in peacetime. If Russia attacks, coordinated military response and full sanctions snapback. If Ukraine attacks Russia first, guarantees are void. Previous bilateral security pacts remain. Russia must write its non-aggression pledge toward Ukraine and Europe into domestic law and ratify it in the State Duma. Ukraine gets a clear timetable for EU membership and short-term preferential access to the EU market, with Kiev eyeing 2027 to 28. A global development deal including tech, AI, data centers, gas infrastructure rebuild, city reconstruction and World Bank-backed funding. Creation of multiple funds to mobilize around $800 billion for reconstruction and humanitarian needs. Ukraine accelerates talks on a free trade agreement with the United States. Kiev confirms it will remain a non-nuclear state under the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. Control of Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant and restoration of Kakhovka hydroelectric power plant. US proposal, Zaporizhzhia NPP jointly operated by Ukraine, Russia, and the US, with 33% each, and the US as primary overseer. Ukraine's counter, a US-Ukraine joint venture, with 50% of electricity for Ukrainian-controlled territories and the US deciding distribution of the other 50%. Both sides agree these facilities and surrounding areas, Zaporizhzhia NPP, Enohoda, Kakhovka HPP, must be demilitarized. Both sides introduce school courses on tolerance. Ukraine adopts EU rules on religious freedom and minority language protection. The line of military positions in Donetsk, Luhansk, Zaporizhzhia and Kherson at signing becomes the de facto front line. Used to determine troop movements needed to end the war and to set up potential, free economic zones, once Russia withdraws troops. Russia must withdraw from occupied parts of Dnipropetrovsk, Mykolaiv, Sumy and Kharkiv oblasts for the agreement to take effect. International forces are deployed along the front line to monitor implementation. Parties commit to follow the 1949 Geneva Conventions and additional protocols, including universal human rights. Russia and Ukraine pledge not to use force to change territorial arrangements and to resolve disputes diplomatically. Russia will not obstruct Ukraine's commercial use of the Dnipro and Black Sea. Kinburn spit to be demilitarized under a separate maritime deal. All for all, prisoner exchange, release of all detained civilians, children and political prisoners, mechanisms to support conflict victims. Ukraine must hold presidential elections as soon as possible after the agreement is signed. The deal is legally binding and overseen by a peace council chaired by the US President Donald Trump, including Ukraine, Europe, NATO, Russia and the US. ceasefire takes effect immediately once all parties sign and approve the agreement. According to reports, Russia is seeking firm guarantees against any future NATO expansion and wants Ukraine to adopt a form of neutral status, even if Kiev eventually joins the European Union. Bloomberg reports that Moscow is additionally pushing for tougher, legally enforceable limits on the size and capabilities of Ukraine's armed forces as part of any final settlement. Russia is also demanding clarity on the future of Western sanctions and how frozen Russian state assets abroad would be treated, viewing these issues as central to any durable agreement. For Moscow, officials insist that any so-called sustainable peace deal must include Kiev's formal acceptance of what Russia calls new territorial realities created since the start of the full-scale invasion.
$25 करोड़ गरीब गरीबी को परास्त करके बाहर निकले।
For the good of our nation, let's work together and let's truly make America great again.
The fastest news breaks.
Requested PM saying that look, you will have to speak to Putin and to Zelensky.
The biggest newsmakers.
The relationship with India is probably the most important bilateral relationship the US will have for the rest of this century.
The capital delivered quite an election result today.
Expert analysis.
The million-dollar question today is how to stop this dance of death.
Ground reports.
I'm standing at the crossroad of the Kumbh Mela. Behind me are more than 100 entry guards.
Long-form interviews.
Exclusionary politics is reflected in Manipur case as well. You don't bother because this is a small state.
Deep dive into burning issues.
It's often said DRC could be the richest country in the whole world. It's because of what sits underneath.
Why exactly did the US topple the Sheikh Hasina government?
HD videos. We don't just break news, we break it down.